Well, in order to do the next section, you're going to have to be able to solve an equation that's a kind of what I call a one-step multiplication equation. So this is a skill that you'll use repeatedly in the homework for a 7.3. So there's no separate homework for these notes. You just need this before you need to practice it a little bit before you get to the next one. So we'll do some together, and then you're going to want to do some by yourself. So this first equation I chose is just super obvious. When you see an equation like this, 5x equals 30, it's just saying 5 times what number equals 30? Well, 5 times 6, so x is 6. So we already know x is 6. So the system is kind of useless when it's obvious like that, but many times it's not obvious. So in algebra, we need a system to figure it out when it's not nice, pretty whole numbers. So if you just think of an equation like a scale, think of what's on the equal means the two weights on either side are balanced, so at the same level. So if you had objects in each side of the scale, if you added something to one side, you'd have to add the same amount of weight to the other side, otherwise they would be lopsided. If I subtract from one side, I have to subtract objects from the other side, or it's lopsided. So the same thing is true if you were to multiply the contents of a side or divide the contents of one of the sides by something. It would be imbalanced if you didn't do it to both sides. So since we're trying to undo, or for figuring out the x, which represents some unknown value, we want to unmultiply. So to unmultiply, that means divide. So that's what I'm doing right here. I'm dividing both sides by 5 because the 5s will divide out and I'll get x, which is what I'm looking for. 30 divided by 5 is 6. Seems pretty simple. So I've given you one that's a little harder, at least to see initially. 4.2x is 840. So something times 4.2 is 840. So we want to divide both sides by the value being multiplied by x. So always get in the habit of writing the problem again. It's a bad habit to write on the original problem. So to unmultiply, we're going to divide both sides by 4.2. Well, 4.2 divided by 4.2 is 1. So I'm left with 1x. That was my goal. Over here, remember when you divide by a decimal, the divisor has to be a whole number. So this divisor is going to have to change to 42. So really the division problem is if that shifts over 1, you're going to have to shift it over 1 in your numerator. So you'd get 8,400. Now, if you think about this, you don't really have to do long division. If you do, it works really quickly, but 42 into 84 is 2, evenly, and then you just throw on the 2 zeros. If you feel better doing the long division, of course you could do that too. We'll do the check on this one, and then I'd like for you to try at least some of the ones on the next page by yourself if you're feeling confident. And remember, you're going to need to show the support like I've done it here. So don't just freestyle if you try some of them on your own. So to check it, you're really just substituting back in for x and seeing if it works. So the problem was 4.2 times something is supposed to be 840. And we think the something is 200. So substitute it in. A common problem I find is people just assume that they got it right. Well, maybe you got the zero, too many zeros, or not enough zeros. So really actually multiply it out. So 200 times 4.2. it doesn't take long, and we could all use the practice. So with decimals, remember you have to add up all the places to the right of the decimal point, which is just 1. So it moves over 1 place. And so this left side is 840. So it equals exactly what's on the other side. So it checks. So only showing you the check now for you to use as you choose. You'll be required to do things like that in pre-algebra in 7th grade. So here's several more examples. If you're feeling confident, you might do one and then check it back with the video or the notes that are posted. Either way, but I encourage you not to simply look at the notes that are posted, but to actually hear the conversation in this video. So let's just knock these out rather quickly here. We're going to divide both sides by 32 because 32 is what is being multiplied by p. Okay, there's no need to really divide here. You can just simplify the fraction. So 8 goes into both. So we could stop right there, or if you prefer, you could make it a mixed number, or you could make it a decimal. Number 4, I have a decimal in the problem, but I don't do anything differently. I do the same thing I did with number 3. I divided by the number with p, so we're going to divide by the number with x. Remember, rewrite your problem. Then you can show that you're dividing both sides. The reason you don't want to write on the original is if you did want to check, you want to be able to see the original with no markings on it. So 0.09, 0.09 divided by each other is 1. So you have 1x. Remember, we're not saying x is 1. We're saying the number in front of x is 1. 1 times x is just x, so we don't write 1x. Over here, you've got to do some work on that denominator. It would become a 9 when you multiply or shift it over 2 places. So if you shift it over 2 places on top, you'd get 330. At this point, you might do long division, but I would, I notice, and hopefully you do too, that numerator and denominator are both divisible by 3. So that would be 110 divided by 3. Well, 3 doesn't go into 110 evenly, so you could just stop right here. Or you could make it a mixed number. The decimal version would be repeating, so you wouldn't want to write it in that form. All right, let's try the last 2, or stop the video, do it, and then come back and check yourself. So I'm going to, firstly, let's just point out, it's pretty obvious that you can't tell what the answer is just by looking at 84 times something is 96. But I know it's going to be like 1 and something, 1 point something, because if you multiplied 84 times 1, you'd get 84. If it was times 2, you'd get double 84, which would be 168, too big. So just kind of keep that in mind before you, so in case you do something crazy in the problem, you can catch your mistake. So 84 divided by 84 gives us 1. So I've got 1p. And over here, if you know your multiplication facts, you should recognize that both are divisible by 12. And you could stop. Or mixed number would be 1 and 1/7. Of course, you just learned in the conversion unit we just did that 8/7 in decimal form is pretty ugly. You never want to give an approximation when you solve an equation unless it's a word problem and it makes sense to have an approximation, or if the instructions tell you to. In our case, we're going to be exact, because being exact is more important right now than estimating. So I'm dividing both sides by 0.48. They divide out. You don't actually have to mark them out. I'm just doing that. It's just a habit, really. And on the other side, remember the 48's got to, or 0.48's got to become a 48. So 120 needs to move, the decimal goes 2 places, so that would give me 12,000. And both of these are divisible by 12, so always think about simplifying. Get a 4 here. 12 into 12,000, of course, is 1,000. And then 4 into 100 is 25. So into 1,000 is 250. And now you know how to solve one-step multiplication equations. And you'll get a lot of practice in homework 7.3. And that's a wrap, folks.